The 12 apostles of Christ were the disciples who followed and learned from Jesus during his earthly ministry. They were chosen by Jesus to be witnesses of his resurrection and to spread the gospel throughout the world. The names of the 12 apostles are: Peter, also called Simon, was a fisherman from Galilee. He was the leader of the apostles and the first to confess that Jesus was the Messiah. He denied Jesus 3 times before his crucifixion but repented and was restored by Jesus. He preached on the day of Pentecost and was martyred in Rome. Andrew was Peter's brother and also a fisherman. He was one of Jesus' first disciples and introduced him to Peter. He preached the gospel in Asia Minor and Greece and was crucified on an X-shaped cross. James, son of Zebedee, also known as James the Greater, was John's brother and also a fisherman. He was part of Jesus' inner circle and witnessed his transfiguration and his agony in Gethsemane. He was the first apostle to be killed by Herod Agrippa I. John was James' brother and also a fisherman. He was Jesus' beloved disciple and the author of the 4th Gospel, the 3 epistles, and the Apocalypse. He took care of Mary, Jesus' mother, after the crucifixion and was exiled to the island of Patmos. Philip, he was from Bethsaida in Galilee and was one of the first to follow Jesus. He brought Nathanael to Jesus and asked him questions about the multiplication of the loaves and about the Father. He preached in Phrygia and Lydia and was martyred by a spear. Bartholomew, also called Nathanael, he was from Cana in Galilee. He was praised by Jesus for his sincerity and faith. He traveled with Philip and preached in India, Armenia, and Ethiopia. He was skinned alive and beheaded. Thomas, also called Didymus, was known for his doubt and disbelief. He demanded to see the nail marks in Jesus' hands and side in order to believe in his resurrection. He also made a confession of faith by saying, "My Lord and my God." He preached in Parthia, Persia, and India and was killed by a spear. Matthew, also called Levi, was a tax collector from Capernaum. He left his profession to follow Jesus and was the author of the 1st Gospel. He emphasized the fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecies in Jesus. He preached in Palestine, Ethiopia, and Persia and was killed by a sword. James, son of Alphaeus, also known as James the Lesser, he was Jesus' cousin and the brother of Judas Thaddeus. He was one of the most obscure apostles and little is known about him. He may have been the author of the Epistle of James. He preached in Palestine and Egypt and was stoned to death. Judas Thaddeus, also called Lebbeus or Thaddeus, he was Jesus' cousin and the brother of James the Less. He was the author of the Epistle of Jude and asked Jesus a question about his manifestation to the disciples. He preached in Mesopotamia, Persia, and Armenia and was killed by a hatchet. Simon the Zealot, also called Simon the Canaanite, he was one of the Jewish revolutionaries fighting against the Roman occupation. He abandoned his political ideology to follow Jesus and become a peacemaker. He preached in Syria, Mesopotamia, and Persia and was killed by a saw. Judas Iscariot, he was the apostles' treasurer and Jesus' betrayer. He allowed himself to be seduced by money and the devil and handed Jesus over to his enemies for 30 pieces of silver. He repented of his sin but did not trust in God's mercy and hanged himself. These were Christ's 12 apostles who gave their lives out of love for him and his kingdom. They were the founders of the Christian church and the models of faith, hope, and charity for all Christians.